Today we will be talking about HR careers in biotech. And you're in a great position to talk about this because you are currently the HR director for Medtronic Neurovascular and the newest president of the National HR Association in SoCal. I'm, excited to get to know you and more about your journey. So if you could kick us off by telling me how long you've been in the industry and what was your first role?
So I've been in the biotech industry for 14 years now. It started off at Edwards Life Sciences, which is a cardiovascular company based out of Irvine, California. And my first role there was a senior representative of human resources, which is essentially an HR generalist role. And I was there for close to 13 years. It was an amazing experience. And I grew a lot, not only professionally, but personally too. Really enjoyed my experience there. And since then, I am now at Medtronic, which is a global leader in the biotech industry. And I'm getting great experience there as well. I'm really enjoying my
That's
experience.
awesome. So, what drew you to the position at Edwards, or did you just kind of happen to stumble on it?
It was a little bit of both. I was intentional about what my next move was, but I was very fortunate to stumble upon Edwards Life Sciences because I had never heard about it. And at the time, it was a fairly small company. It was still in the beginning stages. Um, so the way I heard about it was through job boards. Um, but I was at a point in my life where I was about to get married, and I was going to be relocating down to the Orange County area from Los Angeles. And I had been in a number of different industries. I'd worked at this time in automotive, airline, entertainment. And something that I knew about myself at that point was I need to work for a company that has products or services that I am truly passionate about and really resonates with me. Because when I'm not passionate about what the company does, it doesn't bring out the best in me. I can see like my energy, my passion, my effort is 100 times stronger when I'm really passionate about what the company does. And so I was really thoughtful in my approach about what my next move would be. And I also wanted to make sure it was a growing company, not one that was dying. And at this time, this was like the recession time too, so not a lot of opportunities were available of that kind. But very fortunate to see that Edwards had an opening in human resources, and I was very fortunate to get that
That's
role.
awesome. You kind of touched on one of my next questions, but your work ultimately, impacts patients, it impacts employees. Is that a source of motivation and fulfillment for you?
Absolutely. It is so intrinsically rewarding for me to work with a team that is building products that either save someone's life or give them better quality of life. And not only are we helping the patients, but we're helping the patients' families. I mean, imagine we're extending their life, we're bringing more joy to their life because they're having better quality of life. That's impacting their families and their friends and their communities as well too. So that's very rewarding to me to be a part of a team that does that.
Absolutely. That really resonates with me. I'm in the clinical research space, and the reason that I came into that space was because I wanted to be a part of something bigger than me. And I also wanted to help people. So for me, I find that when I run into challenges, because we all do at work, right? It's not easy work, but it's very worthwhile. For me, remembering that at the end, what is at stake is the patient's well-being. It's, the livelihood and the happiness of our teams. That's really what drives me to focus on, and inviting others to just help me find solutions, and it helps me not get hung up on things that are outside of my control. So speaking of positively impacting people, I know you're passionate about enhancing the employee experience. Can you tell me where that passion comes from? Was there someone or something that inspired you to become who you are today, or how did you develop this servant leadership mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I've reflected, um, I would say the inspiration behind that comes from Martin Luther King Jr. and from Gandhi. In my teenage years, and as I was learning about leaders like them, um, I was very inspired by their leadership approach, the servant leadership approach. And I made a decision in my teenage years that if and when I become a leader, that I want to be a servant leader. That was the kind of leader I wanted to be. Someone who truly cares about the people that they're leading, someone who listens to what their needs are, what their concerns are, and seeks to be the change that they want to see in the world and drive that change to make it a better life, a better experience for the people. And so that's something that really drives me and is a motivating factor for me in my leadership and in my role in human resources. I truly care about everyone that I work with. Um, and when I, take time to listen to what their concerns are, or when I ask for their feedback or input on what can we do to make this a better work experience for you, it gives me such energy and passion to drive that change and make it a better workplace for everyone.
And it just contributes to all that like positive culture too, right? Because when you're doing
Mhm.
that, you're helping others feel heard and you're helping others feel empowered, which is very powerful. I know that you admire empathy and compassion in people, so it's no wonder why those are two things that you really admire in people based on, kind of how you see yourself as a leader and what drives you as a leader. Empathy and compassion are two things that I also admire in people. I think they're learned behaviors, when we actually learn and consciously begin to incorporate them into our life. That's something that varies from individual to individual, right? And based on our background. But generally, and this is, from my experience, once we're doing it consistently, it starts to become more like second nature. Would you agree, or did you have a different experience with that?
I fully agree. I mean, the visual that comes to my mind is, a baby learning to walk. You're going to fall down every now and then, but you got to get back up, be resilient, and keep trying to master that walking. And it's the same thing with learning and trying to master the skill of empathy and compassion. It's a
Mm-hmm.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that desire to be a compassionate or empathetic person, just try to demonstrate that with your actions. And you're going to learn. Sometimes you're going to cross boundaries, and you're going to learn from those experiences and become more aware, more sensitive in how you communicate and how you work with people. And over time, you'll understand people a lot better and understand how you should interact with people depending on, who they are and their preferences too. And something that also drives me there, there's the golden rule, of treat others the way you want to be treated. But I don't believe in that. I believe in the platinum rule, which is treat others the way they want to be treated. So that's something that really drives me when it comes to the empathy and the compassion. And in order to do that, you have to get to know the individual and how they want to be treated in order to treat them that way. And so once I learned about the platinum rule, that was another driving factor for me in my journey of becoming a empathetic leader or a compassionate leader, is really taking the time to get to know the individual and how they prefer to be communicated to, how to interact with them, and how they want to be
That's
treated.
you just taught me something because I'd never heard of the platinum rule. But
Okay.
yeah, I'd never heard of it. But when we're talking about some of these behaviors, we're talking about skills like listening skills, right? Those are important, and you talked about them. And you definitely, if you're not listening, it's really hard to get to know somebody. It's really hard to, also learn to create that safe space so that they can share a little bit more about themselves with you. Um, but I also think, and I love how open you are about talking about this, because I also think that many of us have struggled in this area, not not because we're mean or unemotional. I just think that, empathy and compassion, they aren't reinforced or praised in school, right? Or at work in the same way that technical excellence and compliance are, right? We grow up with those. And in the home, it just varies, right? Depends on the parents, depends on, especially like, from my experience, I come from very humble beginnings. My parents didn't have the resources, right, to teach me a lot of those, like I call them, they call them soft skills, but I think they're really smart skills. So, in my experience, it was the technical excellence that was rewarded with a better grade, a higher title, or some sort of financial incentive, right? So early on in my career, I put most of my energy into my technical skills, which unfortunately for me and from some of the conversations I've had with other people, when you do that, when you put most of the focus there, it kind of comes with certain behaviors that are not so great, that I don't think are so great anymore. Like just wanting to be perfect, wanting to be right, being uncomfortable with feedback, or even just, I remember in my early career where emotions were just seen as unprofessional at work. For me, once I started learning more about the principles of emotional intelligence, that's when the light bulb went off, and I started thinking, oh my God, like I'm actually contributing to some of this negativity around me, right? And I really had to make
Mm.
an effort to unlearn some of those behaviors. And then that made space for
Mhm.
being intentional about incorporating like the empathy and the compassion, working on the listening skills. That was key. So, for me, I've seen
Mhm.
significant improvement just in my ability to manage relationships at all levels, personal and professional. And it's just helped me also become more authentic and vulnerable. Like, I would not be comfortable having this conversation 10 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I'm curious about your experience, Monica, or if you just have any advice for anyone who may be struggling to incorporate these behaviors that are centered on empathy and compassion into their daily lives.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to share is the value of it. One of the moments that a light bulb went on for me about how important emotional intelligence is I remember going through an emotional intelligence
Mhm.
training session. And in that class, the facilitator was going through like a list of skills and asking the class, if you had a choice to have it like an ideal team member, which of these skills would they have? And there was a combination of technical skills and what you mentioned, the soft skills or the emotional
Mhm.
intelligence skills. And 90% of what was selected was the emotional intelligence skills versus the technical skills. And this was a highly technical
Hmm.
group that was in this class. So I found that absolutely fascinating. And the huge takeaway there was when working in teams, EQ is more important than IQ because what you do in your role can be learned. It can be very difficult for people to master the EQ and learn those skills. But it is so critical. And it's unfortunate that, like you said, it's not more infused and incorporated into the curriculum in schools or in universities. There's definitely a huge opportunity there to prepare people for the workforce to be successful in managing relationships and working with people. But I know they're working on like through group projects and things of that nature. But still, you're learning through experience versus understanding what you should be doing there. So there's a big opportunity there. But advice. Your question was what advice would I share to someone who might be struggling to strengthen their skills in that regard? Um, One thing that I would highly recommend is to get a mentor
Okay.
or have a confidant that they admire and respect who has strong skills in that area and they want to model after. Build a relationship with that individual. And as they're going through their journey of mastering it and getting stronger in those areas, as scenarios, situations come up, they can talk to that mentor or confidant about what they're experiencing, because there's not always one way to handle situations. There's a lot of different ways to handle situations, and if you've got a mentor that you respect who can guide you or coach you as those situations come up, or if the situation already happened and you just want to reflect on it and learn from it, again, talk to that mentor about it and learn from the situation. And then next time the situation comes up, because it will come up again, now you're like, okay, I've been through this before, and try again. And usually the outcomes continue to improve and get better and better. So that would be my key guidance: is find a mentor, find a confidant that you can talk to and be vulnerable with, and reflect on these situations to learn from
That's
them.
great advice. I have a question for you. So, for as far as your experience in these biotech companies, in either of them, has HR ever been involved in supporting, the mentorships at all for employees? I know that that's a really hard thing because people tend to be very busy. And then I don't know if there, if HR is involved, if there's any kind of vetting just to make sure that these things are being talked about and it's not just, again, the technical focus.
Yeah. So, in my experience in human resources, I've definitely launched multiple mentorship programs with the departments that I've worked with. So, absolutely, HR is involved in that. And when we launch a mentorship program, the intake of determining who's going to be mentors, who's going to be mentees, is understanding, what do you, as the mentor, what are you able to share? What expertise, what knowledge, what experience are you able to share to help, the mentee? And then with the mentee, what are you hoping to gain from the experience? And we ask them about technical skills that they want to either share or gain from the
Okay.
experience, as well as the soft skills too, because we recognize that that's very important. And so if we've got a mentee who's very interested in strengthening those soft skills, and we've got a mentor who's very good at it and loves to share their experiences for the good of someone else, then we'll
Mhm.
definitely pair them up. Yes. But I'll say, with mentorship programs, as much as we try and make the match on the skills that the mentor will share and the skills that the mentee will gain, there's not always
Mm.
a strong chemistry between the two. And that's something that I'm always trying to improve on, is how can we, when we're matching people, ensure that there's truly that comfortability and chemistry between the mentor and the mentee. And so what I do to try and improve on that is just understanding preferences, like communication preferences. Do you prefer to communicate in person versus over the telephone versus teleconference? Like little nuances like that in communication style and preferences can make a difference in how well they pair up with each other. So I've been trying to ask additional questions in the intake to give us more insight into who would be good fits for each other, to really make sure that there's good chemistry between the two. And then one other lesson learned: a lot of the mentorship programs that I saw in my career
Oh,
early on
wow.
were very long in duration, like 1 year. And I started to see kind of a burnout from the participants around month 5, month 6. And so my recommendation now is to keep the duration of the mentorships on a smaller scale or shorter duration. And then, if they have strong chemistry, if they really are getting a lot out of that, the
Hmm.
relationship is organically and naturally going to continue. They'll keep it going, even though the mentorship program has closed. So it just helps that, you give it out to those that might not be getting as much value or have gotten all that they can get out of it, brings it to a close sooner, rather than trying to keep a mentorship experience going when their heart is no longer in it, and they feel like they've gotten out of it all that they can.
All right, so we
Mhm.
talked about a couple of your projects, but I'm hoping that you could share. Maybe you can give us an example of the most exciting project that you've worked on, so people can have a better idea of what it's like to have an HR role in biotech.
So the project in my career that goes down in history as like the most exciting project I worked on is when I was at Edwards Life Sciences, and I was able to go through the Green Belt certification program. So this is my Green Belt project. And this was when we were coming out of the recession and starting to see a rise in turnover from employees. And what I noticed was um, we didn't have a really good way of gathering the data of why people are choosing to leave. And so I just thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. And I'm very actively involved in the National Human Resources Association in Orange County. And at that time, I was just talking to other colleagues in my network of like, how do you guys do it? How do you do it? What do you do? And got some excellent insights into tools that they used. And so I proposed it as a solution. One of the great tools that I heard of, I proposed it as a solution that we implement at Edwards, and I got the buy-in from leadership to drive that. And so I feel like I have a legacy that I left there at Edwards of implementing their global exit survey tool to gather stronger insights into the why people are choosing to leave organizations so that they can truly action plan on the root causes of why people are leaving versus assumptions of why people are leaving.
Those are really, really important. And it's nice to know that there's people in the background who are really taking a look at those and trying to do something about it for the people that are still in the company, because at the end it's not that the employee, and we've talked about this before, it's not that the employee is leaving the company. They're leaving the team, they're leaving the leaders. That's really what it comes down to, right? Which kind of brings me to um, the project that you were leading. So the about elements that are needed to create a culture of belonging. And where can we find more information about it? Is it somewhere?
So, there's a lot of, okay, let me help explain first, what belonging is. So, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you remember learning about that in Psychology 101, the psychologist Maslow identified that there are 5 categories of needs for people, and there's the basic physiological needs of like air that you breathe, food to eat, etc. Then the next level up is safety, like needing to feel you're in a safe environment and in a stable environment. And then number 3 is the need for love, belonging, and feeling included. And once I recognize like that is like a powerful human need, it made me want to be an advocate for it even more. I don't think a lot of people realize how important it is. And as you shared, Claudia, like from your experiences in the past, like businesses or companies not wanting to acknowledge emotions that people are feeling. I grew up in the same environment in corporate America where it's like emotions don't belong in the workplace. We're here to work, but as over time I've learned, like, guys, we're human. Humans have emotions, therefore we need to acknowledge that and deal with that and work through that. And so, the fortunate thing is with the pandemic, people are starting to realize now that we're human. We have a workforce of humans, and we have to stop. What's the word? I want to say like isolating and just viewing the person as the professional only who's here to do the job. We have to look at the entire person, the entire human that we're working with. and they have a need for love and acceptance and belonging and inclusion. And so, with that, I'm trying to send out a message to leaders, not only within my company, but outside of my company as well, of the role that they can play to help boost that belonging within their respective teams. And this is not just about feel good. Like, this has a huge business impact as well. If you've got people on your teams who feel a sense of belonging and feel included, job satisfaction increases, engagement increases, innovation increases, productivity increases. It has huge tangible business
Mhm.
impacts for a company to be more successful when that is the case. And how belonging also fits into like the overall diversity, equity, inclusion picture. Um, Diversity, equity, and inclusion are the inputs. So if you have a diverse workforce, if you have equitable practices, making sure that systemic policies and procedures don't create
Mhm.
barriers for people, that everyone can have equal opportunity. And then if you're very inclusive in your approach, making sure people are feeling that they're not excluded, but they really truly are included on the team. When you've got all three of those elements, that's what creates
Mhm.
a sense of belonging for the team. So the belonging is the output of those three inputs. All three have to be present. You can't just have diversity and equity only and expect belonging. You've got to have all three: diversity, equity, and inclusion, in order to generate the belonging for the employees. And so, some recommendations that I have in terms of how to boost it. For one, create an environment where it is the norm to encourage and affirm your colleagues. A lot of times, even people managers that I've worked with, are like, why do I need to praise and recognize this person for doing their job? That's what I hired them to do. True, it is what you hired them to do, but you want them to feel that you value it. You value their contribution and what they're doing. And when you give them praise and you recognize them for what they were expected to do, it's reinforcing, it's positively reinforcing that for them, and they'll want to do it
Mhm.
again over and over and over again, if not take it to the next level and do even better. So it's going to be a huge payoff by affirming and encouraging and recognizing people. And it doesn't have to be just the managers that are doing this. Everybody, all colleagues can also play a role in doing the same thing. Just think of the positive culture that will be created as a result of people
Yeah.
being encouraging to one another. Huge payoff for the environment. Another thing I would say is um, having an open mindset. I call it the growth mindset, or being curious. We all were raised in our own bubble of culture, from our families, and then
Mhm.
coming into the global workforce, we're getting exposed to so much more. And it's very important that we have an open mindset to learning different ways of looking at things. And it's beneficial for business when you've got people with all these different perspectives, because think about it, the customer base also has all these different perspectives. So if you've got employees who represent your customers, all the more success the company will experience. But as a workforce or as a team, we need to be able to appreciate and be open minded to learning all the different perspectives that may exist, and have an attitude of gratitude when it comes to that. Sometimes a lot of conflict arises of like, you know, I've never heard anything like that before, or like, and people are just very dismissive of new ideas or new ways of looking at things. And
Mhm.
that kind of creates tensions and not the best environment for people. But if you turn around and have gratitude of,
Mhm.
that's an interesting perspective, thanks for sharing that, never thought of it that way. That has a more positive um, dynamic and will add value to the team. And then people will feel more and more comfortable with sharing different perspectives, which then leads to more innovative ideas and creativity on the team, which again increases productivity and the success of the team. So those are just a couple of things. I've got a list of others, but because of time, I'm going to just limit it to a couple. So
I'm curious to know if, just from your experience, getting buy-in on those elements and just acknowledging how important they are, not just acknowledging, but I guess people who really take action, right? Do you see that it's easier to get buy-in and get people to take action at the more executive level, or do you think it's more at the team level where they're more accepting of these elements? And
I would say it depends on the company and depends on the team. I've seen in my experience
Mhm.
some cases where the leaders are highly bought into it and are great advocates for these things. But lower in the organization, they're not. And then I've seen vice versa, where the new generation is, very empathetic, very compassionate, and really cares about the team and wants to do these things. And then leaders who grew up in a different environment and didn't see that don't demonstrate it or buy into it. So I've seen a combination, but it's just interesting to see how the workforce is just kind of evolving. We have more millennials that are now getting into, higher level leadership positions. So, and the millennials, tend to like have more of that empathetic, compassionate mindset. So as the workforce changes, I'm sure we'll continue to see improvement in that. Yeah. And that's it's very overwhelming for some leaders to customize, how they do things for individuals. The leadership approach used to be kind of a
Mhm.
one size fits all approach. And that doesn't work. I think we're in the Starbucks generation now where we can customize, how we want things and to our preferences. And I think of situational leadership. That was a great book where it talks about how leaders need to be more individual and not just have that one size fits all approach, but really get to know the individual, get to know the situation, and customize your approach to and how you communicate to that individual based on their preferences. It's very important that we learn how to do that. And I know it's not the easiest. It takes more time, it takes more preparation, it takes more thought, but the payoff is so much far better when you approach it that way versus having the same approach with everyone.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, and we'll have to talk a different time about how maybe if you think there is any room for HR to support leaders in that way, or just not just leaders, but everybody at their company as they're seeing the different or understanding that they have different needs and they may need different access to different resources. Some may be, the mentorship program sounds wonderful. I'm sure there's other courses that could possibly be available that or be made available for EQ if it's, if somebody needs additional additional support, and that people just generally feel safe enough to ask for those resources too, right? That culture is
Absolutely.
is
Yeah,
there.
because definitely
Yeah.
people might have needs and but not feel safe enough to express them or share them because they're fearful of, oh, is anyone going to look down on me because I feel like I need to, strengthen my skill set in this area. So the need for, creating that safe space, that safe environment where people feel comfortable sharing is really important. And, that's a role that I
Yeah.
feel HR can play. I've always tried to
Mhm.
be that safe space as the HR business partner of a group where they can come to me without judgment And I am happy to share any thoughts, ideas, recommendations, and coach them on how to navigate or what resources are available to them to help them on their journey.
That's wonderful. And I could totally see you being that.
Thanks.
That's awesome. Okay, so we before we move on to the last question, do you have any additional advice for people who are interested in seeking out an HR career in our industry?
Yes. So I would say things that I did that really helped prepare me to be in human resources in biotech. The first is getting a certification in human resources. Universities have these extension programs, beyond, degree, bachelor's or master's. They have these extension programs where you can get certifications in human resources. And I highly recommend considering those because they really go deep on each function within HR because there's compensation, there's employee relations, there's payroll, recruiting, or talent acquisition. Like there's so many different aspects of human resources, and going through a course on each of them gives you great exposure of what you can do, what benefit you can benefit or impact you can have on a company in the different functions of HR, and it just helps you become more self-aware of which ones would I be the best at, or would I really enjoy. So that exposure I think is really important to really hone in on what aspect of HR you'd like to be in. And then I would say, if you can get an internship that gives you exposure to what the day in the life of being in HR is like, that is a great experience to gain. And another thing that's been very helpful for me is, as I mentioned before, my affiliation with the National Human Resources Association. Having a network of people that you can talk to, that you can learn from, that you can connect with, is very important. Networking is critical, especially in human resources. So it's very important to be a part of communities like that
Mhm.
because it helps you know what opportunities are existing. It helps you understand, what are the best practices that companies locally are doing, and you can learn from those. In fact, if you learn of some best practices that your own company is not doing, you can take those ideas and bring it into your company and even volunteer to lead efforts to implement it, which is what I did. And that really helped my career and helped me grow in my career by doing things like that. So I highly recommend people get involved in those type of communities and make the time for that. It's a time commitment. A lot of
Mhm.
people don't want to make the time for it, but it is very valuable and it's helped me tremendously in my career.
Yeah, it's definitely paid off for you. And, I love it because it's everything that you're saying is centered around learning, learning to collaborate so you could learn some more and
Mhm.
networking.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
awesome. Those are all
Mhm.
just really important. I think that those are really just those skills are really important in any field, honestly. Um,
Yes.
great advice.
And one more is I wouldn't limit myself to just HR networking groups. There are also biotech networking groups too.
Okay.
So if you are interested in specifically being in the biotech industry, start building your connections and your contacts and your network in the biotech industry too, and seek out those. Like, for example, in Orange County, there's a group called Device Alliance that I'm very actively involved in. Excellent community, great people in that network and community. And I've learned and gained a lot from connecting with people in that community.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's a good avenue to seek out, not just the focus on HR, but specifically looking at other corporations and groups that focus on biotech, because I'm sure that it gives you the opportunity to learn like the nuances, right, of that field too. All right. Well, thank you for that, Monica. We're moving on to our last question. What is your current definition of success, and has your definition changed since your first career job? If so, how?
I would definitely say for sure my definition of success has changed over the years. Early in my career, success was the title that I was in, and the influence or impact that I thought I was having on an organization. Like that's what success was. So becoming a director was success to me. But these days, my definition of success is being self-aware, knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, and putting yourself in positions that allow you to fulfill your purpose, fulfill your mission, leave the legacy that you want to leave here on earth. If you're able to achieve that, in my opinion, that's what success is for me.
My definition of success has changed over time too. Similar to yours, it was really about um, the title and the financial, gain as well. Probably all tied again to like the humble beginnings, right? But now that I've matured, similarly, I feel like I've taken time to really think about my values and who I am as a human being, right? Not just what I was taught, but what really aligns with who I am. And it's definitely changed. It's more
Yes.
centered around, like mental, physical, emotional health, um, and making time for
Mhm.
meaningful connection with people I love, uh, with people that inspire me, like you. Like this is very emotionally fulfilling for me. And then just having, the opportunity to share my gifts with others.
Mhm. Yes.
All right. Well,
Love it.
that does bring our episode on HR careers in biotech to a close. Monica, thank you once again for, the insightful conversation and just for being vulnerable. Not everyone is there and has the confidence to do it, right, as well. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me and with our listeners.